She didn't wait for them to reach the gate. She was already moving magazine dropped on the lounger sandals, slapping the concrete phone up and recording before they were even close enough to speak. Excuse me, excuse me." Her voice carried across the entire pool deck. Every head turned. "This is a private facility. Residents only. I don't know which neighborhood you wandered in from, but black people off the street cannot just walk into this pool. I'm going to need you to turn around right now before I call someone." The woman in the sun hat reached into her bag and held up a key fob. Calm, patient. Brenda looked at it like it was a piece of trash someone had found in a parking lot. "Honey, you can buy those on eBay for $3. Put it away." The man stepped forward quietly and said his name, said his address, said he had lived here for 3 months. Brenda smiled. The kind of smile that is not a smile at all. "Sir, I have been a proud member of this community for 9 years. I know every single family in Magnolia Crest, and I promise you nobody here looks like you." He set down his bag of sweet tea and novels. He did not raise his voice. He did not step back. "Ma'am, my name is on the deed to this community." She laughed, loud enough for everyone at the pool to hear. Loud enough that 2 children in the shallow end stopped swimming and looked up. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that the HOA president was already walking across the lawn toward that gate. And the moment he saw that couple standing there, his face drained of every drop of color it had. "Don't go anywhere. Drop your location and local time in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you're watching this. And if you believe dignity should never have to prove itself to anyone, hit subscribe. Because what happens next will stay with you." Before we go any further, you need to understand what Magnolia Crest Estates actually is. Not just a neighborhood, not just a collection of houses behind a stone gate off Abercorn Street on the south side of Savannah, Georgia. Magnolia Crest was the kind of place that used the word estates on its entrance sign like a guarantee. 180 homes on 42 acres of low-country Georgia green Spanish moss, hanging from the live oaks along the main boulevard. Crepe myrtles lining every cul-de-sac in pink and white. The stone pillars at the entrance had been there since 2003. The community pool sat at the center of the property, behind a wrought iron gate, with key fob access, a surveillance camera mounted above the latch, and a hand-painted wooden sign at the entrance that read, "Magnolia Crest Pool Est. 2003, a community built on trust and neighborly care." Brenda Kimball had commissioned that sign herself. She had designed it, chosen the font, selected the stain color, paid for the printing, and personally hammered the mounting bracket into the post on a Saturday morning in April of 2019. She had photographed it that same afternoon and posted the image to the Magnolia Crest Community Facebook group with the caption, "So proud of our little community and the values we stand for." 41 neighbors had liked the post. 3 had left heart reactions. That sign was still there. It had been there every single day since. Now meet Walter and June Caldwell. Walter is 71 years old. He was born and raised in Savannah's East Side, the kind of neighborhood that didn't show up in travel brochures, the kind where you learned early that the world would make you prove yourself twice for everything it handed everyone else once. He was the first person in his family to attend a 4-year university. He studied education at Savannah State, came home, and spent the next 28 years as principal of Grover High School, the largest public high school in Chatham County. 1,400 students, 63 teachers, a building that was held together in some places by institutional paint and personal will. Walter ran it with patience and precision. He knew every student by name, not just the honor roll students, not just the ones whose parents showed up to every meeting, all of them. The ones who came to school in the same clothes 3 days in a row. The ones who fell asleep in first period because they had been working a closing shift somewhere the night before. The ones who needed someone to look them in the eye and say, "You are going to be something." Walter said it so many times to so many people that it stopped being a thing he said and became simply a thing he believed with his whole body. He retired 6 years ago. They gave him a standing ovation in the gymnasium that lasted 4 minutes. He counted. June Caldwell is also 71. She grew up in Brunswick, Georgia, 45 minutes down the coast, the daughter of a fisherman and a seamstress. She became a pediatric nurse at Memorial Health in Savannah, and she stayed for 31 years. She worked nights more often than days because nights were when the children needed someone most. Parents, exhausted units, understaffed, small bodies fighting fevers and infections in the dark. June was the one who stayed. June was the one who learned the names not just of the children, but of their parents and their siblings and their fears. When she retired, the hospital named a unit after her. The June M. Caldwell Pediatric Wing, 3rd floor, East Corridor. A small brass plaque beside the door. 3 months ago, Walter and June purchased a home at Magnolia Crest Estates. The house at 14 Crestwood Court, the largest home in the cul-de-sac. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a kitchen with a view of the back garden that June had decided she was in love with before the realtor had finished unlocking the front door. They paid cash. They had been saving for this house, in one form or another, for 30 years. It was their retirement dream made real at last. They moved in quietly. They waved at neighbors. Most neighbors waved back. Some did not look up. 3 weeks after they moved in, a post appeared in the Magnolia Crest Community Facebook group. The author was Brenda Kimball, Social Committee Chair, 9-year resident administrator of the group. The post read, "Has anyone seen the new couple on Crestwood Court? Don't recognize them. Has anyone actually met them yet?" 14 neighbors liked the post. Nobody answered it. One person typed a response, then deleted it before posting. Outside on the morning that post went up, Luis Garza was trimming the hedges along the Crestwood Court entrance. Luis had worked as the property's maintenance and pool technician for 16 years. He had been present 3 months earlier on the morning the Caldwells came for their welcome. Walkthrough had shaken Walter's hand, shown June where the pool chemical shed was, explained the key fob system. He had taken a photograph of the whole group standing in front of the pool gate on his phone and saved it in a folder simply labeled Residence. He saw Brenda's post that evening on his own Facebook feed. He did not comment. He did not like it. He set his phone face down on his kitchen table and sat with it for a while. Now, the Tuesday afternoon of our story. The temperature in Savannah was 91 degrees by noon and climbing. Walter made 2 bottles of sweet tea before 11 extra ice the way June liked it. He put a bookmark in Chapter 7 of the biography he had been trying to finish for 6 weeks. June packed her sun hat, her own novel, and a small container of cut fruit. They walked 2 blocks down Crestwood Court to the pool. They were not hurrying. They had nowhere to be. That was the whole point. And Brenda Kimball was already there. Walter swiped the key fob at the gate. The little light blinked green. The latch clicked open. He held the gate for June, and she walked through ahead of him, the way she always did, the way he had held doors for her for 43 years of marriage. The pool was quiet that Tuesday. A retired couple reading under a striped umbrella near the shallow end. A young mother watching a toddler in floaties. 2 teenage boys on their phones at the far edge. The smell of chlorine and sunscreen and cut grass drifting in from the lawn beyond the fence. Walter spotted 2 empty loungers in the shade near the middle of the deck. He pointed. June nodded. They moved toward them without hurry. They did not see Brenda Kimball at first. She was in the corner near the gate, white cover-up, oversized sunglasses, magazine open on her lap phone, face up on the small table beside her. She saw them the moment they came through the gate. Her magazine stopped turning. Her head lifted slowly, the way a person's head lifts when they see something they have already decided is wrong. She watched them cross the pool deck. She watched Walter set the bag of sweet tea down on the small table between the two loungers. She watched June settle into her chair and reach for her sun hat. Then Brenda Kimball stood up. "Excuse me." Walter looked up. "Can I help you?" His voice was easy, unhurried. "I don't recognize you." She had already crossed half the distance between them. "Are you guests of a resident?" "No," Walter said. "We're residents." "Which house?" 14 Crestwood Court. She tilted her head, a small practiced motion. The kind that says, "I don't believe you," without committing to saying it out loud. "That house was purchased 3 months ago. I would have known if it was you." June looked up from her bag. Quiet. Patient. "It was us." She reached into the front pocket of her bag and produced her key fob, held it out. Brenda took it between 2 fingers. She held it up to the light, the way a person holds up a bill they suspect is counterfeit. She turned it over once, then she flicked it back. It left her hand without care, without aim. It hit the concrete edge of the lounger and clattered down to the pool deck. June watched it fall. She did not move immediately. She sat very still for 1 full second, the second it takes a person to decide whether to let something break them or let it pass through. Then she leaned forward slowly and reached down and picked it up from the ground. Her movements were careful, deliberate. The movements of a woman who had spent 31 years doing precise things in difficult moments. Nobody at the pool said anything. The young mother looked away. The retired couple under the umbrella had stopped reading. Brenda was not finished. She turned to a young woman sitting 2 loungers down, early 30s, white, a neighbor she recognized from the building's 4th of July event last summer. She had never spoken to the Caldwells in her life. Brenda leaned toward her slightly and said it loudly enough for the whole deck to hear. "Sweetie, could you move your bag away from those chairs? I don't want anything to go missing." The young woman blinked, looked at her bag, looked at the Caldwells, looked at her bag again. She didn't move it, but she didn't say anything either. She looked down at her phone instead, the way people look at their phones when they want to disappear from a moment they don't know how to be inside. Walter's hand found June's on the armrest of her chair. He covered it gently. She did not look at him. She looked straight ahead at the water. Flat and blue and still. He did not raise his voice. He had never raised his voice in 43 years of marriage, and he was not going to start now, not here, not for Brenda Kimball. "Ma'am," he said, "we have paid our HOA dues. We have a valid key fob. We have identified ourselves and our address. Is there something else you need from us?" "Yes," Brenda said. "I need you to wait here while I verify your residency with someone who can actually confirm it." "You're welcome to do that," Walter said. He picked up his novel. He opened it to chapter 7. He was not leaving. Brenda pulled out her phone. Not to call Harold Sutton. Not yet. First she opened Facebook. She switched to Live. She centered her own face in the frame, the pool deck visible behind her, the hand-painted wooden sign on the gatepost, visible just over her left shoulder, a community built on trust and neighborly care. And she began to narrate. "Hi everyone, it's Brenda. I'm at the Magnolia Crest pool and we have a situation. 2 individuals have entered the facility and cannot verify residency to my satisfaction. I'm handling it, but I wanted to document this in real time for the community's awareness." She swung the camera around. Walter and June were in the frame. Walter reading. June with her sun hat tilted slightly against the afternoon light. 2 elderly people in pool chairs with sweet tea and novels and nowhere to be. 64 people were watching the live stream within 90 seconds. Luis Garza was on the far side of the fence checking the chemical levels in the pump housing. He heard Brenda's voice carry over the deck. He straightened up. He looked through the fence slats and saw Walter Caldwell in the chair. He recognized him immediately, the same man he had shaken hands with at the welcome walkthrough 3 months ago. He stood there for a moment. Then he pulled out his personal phone, and he started filming. Not Brenda, not the situation, just the truth of what was actually happening on that pool deck. What came next would make sure no one could ever claim they hadn't seen it. Brenda ended the live stream after 4 minutes. She had 212 viewers by the time she stopped. She did not read the comments. She would read them later and wish she hadn't, but that was later. Right now she had a task. She called Harold Sutton. Harold was the HOA president of Magnolia Crest Estates, 67 years old, 11 years as a resident. A retired civil engineer who had taken the board presidency 6 years ago because nobody else wanted it, and because he believed genuinely and without irony that a community was only as good as its governing structure. He kept the HOA bylaws in a binder on his desk at home. He had read them cover to cover 3 times in 6 years. He knew every clause. He also knew exactly who Walter and June Caldwell were. He had known since the day the closing documents came across the property management company's desk 3 months ago. He had personally reviewed the sale. He had added them to the resident directory that same afternoon. He had meant to stop by and introduce himself. He had put it off twice. He would think about that later. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He saw Brenda's name. He picked up. "Brenda. Harold, I need you at the pool right now. There are 2 individuals who cannot verify residency and are refusing to leave. I've already done a live video for documentation purposes, and I need you here to handle the removal." Harold closed his eyes for 1 full second. "Brenda, who are these individuals?" "I don't know who they are, Harold. That's the entire point. They say they live on Crestwood Court, but I have never seen them before in my life, and what is the address they gave you?" 14 Crestwood Court, but that doesn't mean... Harold had already pushed back his chair. He was reaching for his keys. "I'll be there in 2 minutes. Do not call anyone else. Do not do anything else. I'm coming." He drove the 4 blocks instead of walking, because he needed to think, and he needed to arrive before Brenda did something that couldn't be undone. He already suspected it might be too late. It was. He pulled into the small parking area beside the pool gate and walked through at a pace that was faster than he normally moved. He came around the hedgerow and saw the pool deck, saw Brenda standing with her arms crossed at the edge of the shaded area, saw the 2 empty loungers, saw Walter Caldwell sitting in one of them, with a novel open on his lap, a bottle of sweet tea on the side table, saw June Caldwell in the chair beside him, sun hat on, looking at the water. Harold Sutton's face went completely white. Not pale. White. The way a face goes when the brain has processed something the body hasn't caught up to yet. He crossed the deck in 12 steps. Brenda turned when she heard him coming. "Harold, thank God. I need you to..." "Brenda." His voice was low, controlled. "Come here. I need to speak with you, so. I'm not going anywhere until these 2. Now, Brenda." He said it with a quietness that was somehow louder than volume. "Please." She followed him 3 steps away from the loungers. He leaned toward her and kept his voice below the range of the deck. "Do you know who that man is?" "I told you I've never seen." "That is Walter Caldwell. His wife is June Caldwell. They purchased 14 Crestwood Court 12 weeks ago. They are paid in full homeowners of this community. I personally reviewed their closing documents." Brenda stared at him. "I've never seen them before, Harold. In 9 years I have never— Brenda. He said her name like a door being gently closed. You need to stop. Right now. Whatever you have already done today, you need to stop anything further immediately. Something moved across her face. Not regret. Not yet. Something closer to recalculation. She straightened. She raised her chin. Harold, I am the social committee chair of this community. I have a responsibility to— You called them people who don't belong here, in front of everyone at this pool. I didn't say that. You suggested to another resident that she move her bag because something might go missing. His voice did not rise. It dropped. In front of everyone. Brenda opened her mouth, closed it. Harold turned toward the Caldwells. He was about to walk over and introduce himself properly and begin to repair what had been broken here when Brenda did the thing he had specifically told her not to do. She called 911. She had stepped 2 feet away and dialed before he had finished turning. He heard her voice behind him, professional, measured, entirely composed. Yes, hi, I need police assistance at the Magnolia Crest Estates Community Pool off Abercorn Street in Savannah. I have 2 individuals on the premises who have refused to cooperate with community leadership, who cannot produce satisfactory proof of residency, and who are becoming hostile toward residents. Yes. Please hurry. Harold turned back around slowly. He looked at her. She met his eyes without flinching. Across the pool deck, Walter had lowered his novel. He had heard every word. He looked at Harold. Harold looked at Walter. Walter Caldwell was a man who had spent 28 years watching young people get accused of things before they were given the chance to prove otherwise. He had spent 28 years being the person who said, "Wait. Look again. Look properly." He set his novel face down on his knee. He looked back at the water. He was not leaving. And somewhere behind the fence line, Luis Garza kept filming. His hand was perfectly steady. 6 minutes later, the sirens came. 2 cruisers, 4 doors, 2 officers each. The first through this pool gate was Officer Kevin Pratt. 28 years old, 4 months on the force, still carrying the particular tension of someone who has not yet learned to read a scene before reacting to it. His hand drifted toward his belt before he had fully taken in what was in front of him. His eyes moved fast, scanning, sorting, categorizing, and landed on Walter Caldwell before they landed on anything else. The second officer was Captain Tanya Marsh, 15 years on the job. She came through the gate 2 steps behind Pratt and stopped moving the moment she cleared the entrance. She stood completely still for 3 full seconds. Her eyes did not move fast. They moved the way experienced eyes move, slow, wide, taking everything in at once before committing to anything. Here is what Captain Marsh saw. She saw a pool deck on a Tuesday afternoon in 91-degree heat. She saw a retired couple in lounge chairs, an elderly black man with a novel open on his knee and a bottle of sweet tea on the table beside him, an elderly black woman in a sun hat with a book in her lap and a container of cut fruit on the armrest. She saw a white woman in a cover-up, standing 12 feet away, with her phone in her hand and her chin lifted, and the particular expression of someone who believes they have done the right thing and is waiting to be told so. She saw a man in his late 60s standing apart from everyone, hands at his sides, looking at the ground like a person who has just realized how far a thing has gone. She saw a young woman at a far lounger who was staring at her phone with the focused intensity of someone who desperately does not want to be looked at. She saw 2 teenage boys who had gone very still. She saw a hand-painted wooden sign on the gate post behind the woman with the phone. A community built on trust and neighborly care. She filed all of it. She did not move yet. Pratt spoke first. His voice was a register too high and a half step too fast. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the chairs and keep your hands where I can see them." Walter looked up at him. He set his novel down carefully on the side table, spine up, page marked. He placed both hands on the armrests of the chair, visible, unhurried, and he stood slowly. June did not stand. She watched. "My name is Walter Caldwell," Walter said. "I am a resident of this community. My address is 14 Crestwood Court. My ID and my key fob are in the front pocket of my bag, which is on the table to my right. I would like to retrieve them." "I'll get the bag, sir." Pratt moved past Walter without asking. He unzipped the bag, found the wallet, pulled it out. He did not ask permission. He did not look at Walter while he did it. He flipped the driver's license over and checked the address. His face did something small, a tightening around the eyes, a slight shift in the jaw. The face a person makes when the information they have just received does not match the category they had already assigned. The address on the license read 14 Crestwood Court, Savannah, Georgia. Captain Marsh had watched Pratt take the bag. She had watched his face when he read the license. She said nothing in that moment. She filed it the way she filed everything, carefully, completely, for later. She turned to Brenda. "Ma'am, I need you to lower the phone while I conduct this conversation. This is a public space. I have every right to document." "I am not asking you to delete anything," Marsh said. Her voice was the same temperature it had been since she walked through the gate. "I am asking you to lower the phone while I speak. Please." Brenda lowered it 3 inches. The camera kept rolling, angled now at the concrete. Marsh turned to Harold Sutton. She had already identified him as the person in this scene who knew the most and had said the least. "Sir, are you the HOA president?" "I am," Harold said. "Can you come with me for a moment?" They walked to the far edge of the pool deck, out of the range of easy hearing. Harold spoke for 90 seconds without stopping. Marsh did not take notes. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she stood very still for a moment. Then she did something Harold would remember for a long time. She closed her eyes for exactly 1 full second, then opened them, then walked back across the deck. She did not arrest Walter Caldwell. She did not ask him to leave. She did not issue a warning or a citation or a request of any kind. She looked at him, and her voice shifted, quieter, more level, the voice she used when she was no longer managing a scene but speaking to a person. "Mr. Caldwell, I apologize for the response time and for the manner of it. You are under no obligation to remain here for our process. Is there anything you need from us before we go?" Walter looked at her for a moment. "No," he said. "Thank you, Captain." She turned to Brenda. The look she gave her lasted 2 seconds and contained no words and required none. "Ma'am, I think you should sit down." The phone came all the way down for the first time. The officers left without writing a single citation against Walter or June Caldwell. Before Captain Marsh reached her cruiser, she pulled out her incident report log and began typing with one thumb while she walked. In the flags field at the bottom, she checked the box marked Internal Review, Recommended Dispatch Categorization. Then she looked back once through the wrought iron gate at the pool deck. At the entrance post, the hand-painted sign caught the afternoon light, a community built on trust and neighborly care. She got in her cruiser. She drove slowly. She was thinking. And behind the fence line, Luis Garza lowered his phone. He had 17 minutes of footage. He saved it to 2 places. After the cruisers left, the pool deck was very quiet. The teenage boys had gathered their things and gone. The young mother had taken her toddler out of the water and wrapped him in a towel and was moving toward the gate with the particular speed of someone who has decided they were never really here. The young woman who had been asked to move her bag was still sitting in her lounger, but she had not looked up from her phone in 11 minutes, and her shoulders had the shape of someone who would spend a long time thinking about this afternoon. The retired couple under the umbrella had not moved. They were not reading anymore. They were simply sitting, the way people sit when they have witnessed something they do not yet have language for. Harold Sutton stood at the edge of the deck for a long moment after the officers left. Then he walked across to the Caldwells. He stopped in front of them, and he did not launch into explanation or procedure or the language of institutional apology. He stood there for a second, and then he sat down in the empty lounger beside Walter, uninvited. The way a person sits when what they have to say is too heavy to say standing up. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "I recognized you the moment I came through that gate. I knew who you were 3 months ago when the closing documents came across my desk. I should have come to your home that week and introduced myself personally. I did not do that. I am not going to tell you why I didn't, because there is no version of that reason that reflects well on me." Walter looked at him for a long moment. "Harold," he said, "I appreciate that. I do. But what I need from you right now is not an apology. What do you need? I need you to make sure the process works. Whatever process this community has, I need you to let it run. Don't protect anyone from it. Don't soften it. Let it do what it was designed to do." Harold nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Good." Walter picked up his novel. He opened it to chapter 7. "Then we're fine." June had not spoken during any of this. She was looking at the water. The pool was perfectly still, now no children, no splashing, just the flat blue surface catching the late afternoon light. After Harold stood and walked away, she reached over without looking and covered Walter's hand with hers. He turned his palm up and held it. They stayed another 40 minutes. They finished their sweet tea. Walter got 3 chapters further than he had in 6 weeks. June ate the cut fruit slowly and read 40 pages of her novel. When the sun moved behind the tree line and the air cooled by 2 degrees, they gathered their things, walked back through the gate, and made the 2-block walk home along Crestwood Court. Inside, Walter called their daughter. Diane Caldwell was 44 years old, a civil rights attorney at a firm in Atlanta that specialized in housing discrimination and wrongful enforcement cases. She had her father's patience and her mother's precision, and she had been doing this work for 16 years. She picked up on the second ring. "Dad, what's wrong?" he told her calmly. "In order. Nothing left out." She was silent for a long time after he finished. Then she asked 2 questions, the same 2 questions that mattered. "Are you and Mom safe?" "Yes." "Do we have it on video?" "I believe so. The maintenance worker and the woman's own Facebook Live. Don't post anything. Don't respond to anything. Don't speak to anyone from the HOA until I tell you to. I'm filing a formal records request tonight." A pause. "Dad, I'm sorry this happened." "Don't be sorry," Walter said. "Be ready." His second call was to Malcolm Reese. Malcolm was 39 years old, currently serving his 2nd term on the Savannah City Council, representing the district that included Magnolia Crest Estates. He had been a student at Grover High School in 2001. He had been 17, failing 2 classes, drifting toward a version of himself he would not have recovered from. When Walter Caldwell had called him into the principal's office and sat across the desk from him and said without preamble, "You are one of the 3 smartest young people in this building. I need you to stop pretending otherwise." Malcolm had not forgotten that afternoon. He had thought about it on the night he was first elected to the city council. He had thought about it on the night he was re-elected. He thought about it more than he would ever tell anyone. He picked up on the first ring. "Mr. Caldwell." Walter told him what had happened. Malcolm listened without interrupting. When Walter finished, Malcolm was quiet for a moment. "Are you calling me for help?" "No," Walter said. I'm calling so you're not surprised when you see it. Another silence. Then, Mr. Caldwell, you spent 28 years building this city one student at a time. I'll be ready for whatever this needs. Walter thanked him and hung up. Meanwhile, across the community, Brenda Kimball had gone home and uploaded the unedited Facebook Live to the community group. By 7 in the evening, it had 400 views. By 10, it had 3,000. By midnight, the number was climbing past 18,000, and the comments had turned into something she had not expected and could not control. Someone had found the 17-minute video Luis Garza had posted to his own personal page. Someone else had found the audio from the 911 dispatch call through a public records aggregator. Both were being shared alongside hers. In the comments section of her own video, pinned to the top by engagement, was a single line from an account she didn't recognize. Brenda. Do you know who those people are? She scrolled past it. She was still not worried. Not yet. She would be by morning. Brenda Kimball's phone began at 6:04 in the morning. Not a single notification. A wall of them. The kind that come in so fast, the screen doesn't refresh between alerts, just stacks them one on top of the other, until the number in the corner stops being a number and becomes a symbol. She sat up in bed. The room was still dark. Gary was still asleep beside her. She unlocked the phone with the particular careful dread of a person who already knows somewhere below conscious thought that what they are about to see is going to change the shape of their day. The Facebook video had 41,000 views. There were 1,004 comments. She did not read them. She could not read them yet. She put the phone face down on the nightstand and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark and breathed for a moment. Gary stirred. Brenda, go back to sleep. She took the phone to the kitchen. She made coffee. She stood at the counter and she made herself read the comments in order from the beginning, which was the bravest and most devastating thing she had done in 9 years of living at Magnolia Crest. By the 14th comment, she had learned that Luis Garza's 17-minute video had been viewed 230,000 times across 3 platforms. By the 31st comment, she had learned that a reporter from the Savannah Morning News had already reached out to the Chatham County Police Department for a statement. By the 52nd comment, she had learned the thing that made her set the coffee cup down on the counter and not pick it up again. Someone had posted a link. She clicked it. It opened a page from the Savannah Business Chronicle. The article was 14 months old. The headline read, "Retired Educator Walter Caldwell, honored by Chatham County Commission for 28 years of service to Savannah youth." She stared at the photograph. Walter in a suit, shaking hands with the county commissioner. Behind him in the second row, partially visible, was a face she recognized. Harold Sutton, smiling. She kept reading. The second link in the comments opened a Memorial Health press release from 2 years ago. June M. Caldwell, RN, retires. After 31 years, pediatric wing named in her honor. She kept reading. The third link was different. It was older. It opened a digitized archive page from the Savannah Morning News dated 1987. The headline was small and institutional. Caldwell Trust, among 3 original investors in Magnolia Crest Tract Development. Brenda read the sentence 3 times. She stood up from the kitchen stool. She walked through the living room. She opened the front door and stood on the porch in her robe in the early morning air, and she looked down the boulevard toward the stone entrance pillars at the front of Magnolia Crest Estates. The light was just coming up. The stone was gray and gold in the early sun. She could read the sign from her porch. She had read it, or rather not read it, every day for 9 years. Her eyes had moved across it, the way eyes move across something's familiar. It has become invisible. Magnolia Crest Estates. established 2003 in partnership with the Caldwell Community Trust. The name had been on that sign for 37 years. Walter Caldwell's father, Elijah Caldwell, had been one of 3 original investors in the land tract that Magnolia Crest was built on. The Caldwell name had been carved into that stone before a single house had been framed, before a single driveway had been poured, before Brenda Kimball had ever driven down Abercorn Street and decided this was the neighborhood she wanted to live in. She had driven past that sign 9,216 times. She had walked past it on her morning routes. She had photographed it for the community Facebook page. She had used it as a background in the photo she posted when Magnolia Crest won the Chatham County Community Pride Award in 2021. The name was always there. It had always been there. Gary appeared in the doorway behind her. He was holding his phone. His face had the expression of a man who has already done the reading and is now waiting for his wife to catch up. Brenda. She did not turn around. Gary. You need to call a lawyer. She came back inside. She sat at the kitchen table. She opened her laptop. She typed 4 words into the search bar. Walter Caldwell, Savannah, Georgia. 41 results. She did not need to read all of them. She read 7. 28 years as principal of Grover High, the largest public school in Chatham County. 3,412 students who had passed through that building during his tenure. A gymnasium named after him. A scholarship fund in his name at Savannah State that had sent 61 students to college in the 11 years since its founding. The Chatham County Education Award. The Georgia Principal of the Year, 2014. June's unit at Memorial Health. The brass plaque. The 31 years of night shifts. The 1987 Land Trust. The stone sign. And then in the 8th result, something she had not expected. A photograph. Not an official photograph. A personal one posted on a community blog about Savannah's history. It showed a groundbreaking ceremony at the Magnolia Crest tract, taken in 2001, 2 years before the community opened. A group of men in hard hats and suits. In the front row, one of them was holding a ceremonial shovel, smiling at the camera. He was younger. His hair was dark. But the face was the same face she had pointed her camera at yesterday afternoon while he sat in a pool chair reading a novel. Beside him, 1 step to the right, was Gerald Sutton Harold's father, the original HOA trustee. They had both been there from the beginning. Brenda closed the laptop. She placed both hands flat on the table. She stared at the wood grain for a long time. From somewhere down the hall, Gary said it again. Quiet. Final. Brenda, call a lawyer. Savannah Police Chief Audrey Coleman arrived at her office at 7:15 on Wednesday morning to find 3 things on her desk. The first was a printed copy of Captain Tanya Marsh's incident report, flagged at the bottom with the internal review notation Marsh had entered the night of the pool incident. The second was a printed transcript of the 911 dispatch call. The third was a handwritten note from her deputy chief that said simply, "You need to see the Luis Garza video before you speak to anyone." She watched it on her laptop with the door closed and the blinds drawn. All 17 minutes. She did not fast forward. She watched Walter Caldwell show his key fob. She watched Brenda Kimball flick it back without care. She watched it hit the concrete. She watched June Caldwell lean forward slowly and pick it up from the ground with the careful movements of a woman who has spent a lifetime deciding not to let things break her. She watched Officer Pratt walk past Walter without asking and retrieve the bag. She watched the whole of it in silence from beginning to end. When it finished, she sat for a long moment without moving. Then she picked up her phone and called her internal affairs lieutenant. "My office, 20 minutes. By 9 a.m., a formal internal review had been opened on Officer Kevin Pratt. By 9:30, a second review had been opened on the dispatch desk that had accepted Brenda Kimball's 911 call and categorized two elderly people sitting in pool chairs as a hostile situation requiring urgent response. Chief Coleman was methodical. She did not call the press. She did not make statements. She followed the department's review protocol the way it was written, not the way it was usually practiced, which was to say she followed it completely. The review examined 3 questions. The first, did Officer Pratt follow department protocol when approaching a compliant resident at a community pool? They pulled his body camera footage and watched it in a conference room with the blinds closed. The answer was no. He had retrieved Walter Caldwell's personal bag without explicit consent. He had used a tone and cadence appropriate for a suspect, not a resident. He had not escalated beyond those errors. He had not raised his voice, had not touched his weapon, had not made physical contact. But the errors were documented, and they were clear. The second, had Captain Marsh performed correctly? The answer was better than yes. Her de-escalation had been precise, professional, and had prevented an ordinary Tuesday afternoon from becoming something that could not be undone. The civilian oversight representative in the room, a retired federal judge named Harriet Monroe, said it plainly. Captain Marsh is the reason we are reviewing this incident instead of managing its aftermath. The third question was the one that kept Chief Coleman at her desk past 8 that evening. Why had the 911 dispatcher accepted a call describing 2 elderly people in pool chairs as an urgent hostile situation on the basis of one caller's word, with no corroborating detail, and dispatched 2 cruisers with priority response? They played the dispatch audio in the conference room. The room was very quiet when it ended. Nobody spoke for a long time. Harriet Monroe said, "We have a template problem." Chief Coleman said, "We have had a template problem for a long time." The internal review expanded on the spot. It would now examine every 911 call received by Savannah Dispatch over the preceding 2 years in which the caller's description included a racial identifier and the responding officers found no crime on arrival. The preliminary list was generated by the end of the day. It was longer than anyone in the room wanted it to be. Meanwhile, 4 miles away, the Magnolia Crest HOA board was convening an emergency session. Harold Sutton called the meeting at 7 Wednesday morning and sent formal notice to all 5 board members by 8. The session was scheduled for Thursday night. Brenda Kimball received written notice by certified mail that afternoon. She signed for it in her front hallway. Gary watched from the kitchen doorway. He did not say anything. She opened the envelope at the kitchen table. The charges were listed on the first page in plain numbered language. 1 violation of HOA Bylaw 4B, prohibiting the invocation of emergency services against a fellow resident on the basis of race, ethnicity, or unverified suspicion of residential status. 2. Abuse of social committee chair authority through public documentation and live broadcasting of a fellow resident without consent and without factual basis for the characterization presented. 3. Creation of a hostile environment for fellow residents. Walter and June Caldwell, through a pattern of conduct, including prior social media posts, public accusations, and actions at the community pool on Tuesday afternoon. The penalties listed on the second page were specific. Removal from all HOA committee positions. Suspension of all community amenity access for a minimum of 180 days. Referral to the property management company for formal civil review, which under the existing covenant structure could result in additional financial penalty. Brenda called her attorney. His name was Theodore Aldridge, a local civil attorney she had used once before for a boundary dispute with a neighbor. He drove out that afternoon and sat at her kitchen table and watched all 3 videos: Luis's footage, the body camera audio, her own Facebook Live in full, including the part where the hand-painted sign was visible over her left shoulder for the entire duration. Theodore leaned back in his chair when it was done. He rubbed his eyes with the heels of both hands. "Brenda," he said, "I am going to be honest with you as your attorney. Our strategy here is not to win Thursday night. I want to fight it." He looked at her for a long moment. "All right. We fight it. And then we lose. And then we spend whatever comes after that, trying to protect what we can protect." She nodded. He gathered his papers and his laptop and his coat and walked to the front door. He stopped with his hand on the frame and looked back. "Brenda, the sign on the gate post." She did not answer. "You put that sign there," he said. It was not a question. He left without saying anything else. Thursday night, 7 o'clock, the Magnolia Crest Clubhouse. The main meeting room held 40 chairs and had been used for wine tastings and holiday planning committees, and one contentious debate about whether the community should allow short-term rentals. Tonight, every chair was filled, and 6 people were standing along the back wall. 5 HOA board members sat at a long table at the front of the room. Harold Sutton in the center. To his left, 2 members who had served the board for 4 years each. To his right, a woman named Patricia Osei, who had joined the board 18 months ago and who sat with her hands folded on the table and her face very still. And at the far right, a retired pediatric surgeon named Dr. Calvin Marsh, no relation to the police captain, who had been on the board for 7 years, and who had a reputation for asking the question nobody else in the room wanted to ask. Brenda Kimball sat at the complainant's table with Theodore Aldridge beside her, a yellow legal pad between them. 2 pens, a glass of water, she had not touched. In the second row sat the property management company representative, a woman named Gloria Tran, who was there to observe and document. In the third row, a reporter named Harper Quinlan from the Savannah Morning News, spiral notebook open, pen moving. In the back row, in the last seat against the wall, sat Diane Caldwell. She wore a plain dark blazer and no expression. She had driven up from Atlanta that morning. She had not told her parents she was coming. She had a briefcase on the floor beside her chair that she did not open. Walter and June Caldwell were not there. Walter had declined in writing to attend. He had declined to submit a victim impact statement. He had declined to send anyone to speak on his behalf. His written statement to the board, delivered through Diane and read aloud by Harold Sutton at the opening of the session, was 5 sentences long. Harold's hands were not entirely steady when he read it. The evidence in this matter speaks for itself. I ask only that this board apply its own bylaws to its own member in the same manner it would apply them to any other resident of this community. I do not require the weight of my history here to make that case. The rules should be enough. Please proceed. The room was quiet for 4 full seconds after Harold finished reading. Theodore Aldridge stood and presented Brenda's defense. He was professional. He was thorough. He argued that she had acted from genuine concern for community safety. He argued that the social committee chair role required active vigilance. He argued that an error of identification, however regrettable, was not by itself evidence of discriminatory intent. He spoke for 22 minutes. He was the best version of the argument that could be made. When he sat down, Dr. Calvin Marsh leaned forward and asked Brenda to take the stand. She sat. She smoothed her skirt. She described herself as a volunteer who had given 9 years to this community. She described her role as one of active stewardship. She described Tuesday's events as a mistake made in the sincere interest of resident safety. She spoke for 11 minutes. She did not apologize. She did not say the names Walter or June Caldwell. Not once. When she finished, Dr. Marsh looked at her for a moment. He had one question. "Mrs. Kimball, if an elderly white couple you did not personally recognize had walked through that pool gate on Tuesday afternoon with a key fob and a novel and 2 bottles of sweet tea, would you have called 911? The room went absolutely still. The reporter's pen stopped moving. Brenda opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I would have handled it differently. That is not a yes or a no, Mrs. Kimball. I would have asked more questions before. That is still not a yes or a no. The silence in the room was the kind that has weight, the kind you can feel against your skin. Then very quietly, Brenda Kimball said the word that ended her 9 years of public life in this community. No. Dr. Marsh wrote one line in his notes. He did not look up. Thank you, Mrs. Kimball. You may step down. Luis Garza was called next. He had not planned to speak. Harold had called him that morning and asked if he would be willing to give a brief account of what he had witnessed. Luis had said yes in the same tone he used when someone asked him to check the pool chemical levels, quiet matter of fact, because it needed to be done. He stood at the front of the room and described what he had seen. He did not editorialize. He said he had recognized the Caldwells from their welcome walkthrough 3 months earlier. He said he had watched the key fob hit the concrete. He said he had watched Mrs. Caldwell lean forward and pick it up. He said he had watched Officer Pratt take Mr. Caldwell's bag without asking. He said he had filmed it because he believed the record mattered. His final sentence was, "I have worked at this property for 16 years. I have never seen a resident treated that way." Then the video played. The room watched it on the wall-mounted screen in complete silence. 17 minutes. Brenda's voice sharp and clear through the speakers. "Honey, you can buy those on eBay for $3. The fob leaving her hand. The sound of it hitting the concrete, June's slow, careful movement as she reached down to retrieve it. Walter's voice from the chair, steady as stone, "Ma'am. My name is on the deed." And over Brenda's left shoulder, for the entire duration, visible in every frame, the hand-painted wooden sign she had commissioned and installed and photographed and posted about. A community built on trust and neighborly care. Nobody in the room moved when the video ended. Harper Quinlan underlined something in her notebook and drew a box around it. The board went into executive session at 8:43. The clock on the wall read 9:21 when they returned. Harold Sutton read the ruling. His voice was level. Margaret Brenda Kimball was found in violation of HOA Bylaw 4B. She was removed from the Social Committee chair position, effective immediately. Her administrator access to the community Facebook group was revoked. All community amenity access pool clubhouse fitness center community events was suspended for 180 days. Her case was formally referred to the property management company for civil review. There was no applause. No reaction of any kind. This was the tone Walter Caldwell had asked for in 5 sentences from a chair in his home 2 miles away. This was exactly what he had meant. Let me tell you what landed on Brenda Kimball's life in the weeks that followed. Her 180-day amenity suspension was entered into the HOA's permanent community record on the Friday after the hearing. Pool, clubhouse, fitness center, community events. All of it closed to her for 6 months, documented in writing, attached to her property file. The civil referral was processed by the property management company the following Monday. It resulted in a mandatory enrollment in a Fair Housing Awareness Program, a 16-hour course offered through the Savannah Fair Housing Council. Attendance was made a condition of her future standing in the community. The enrollment fee was $4,200. She paid it without contesting it, because Theodore Aldridge had told her contesting it would cost more and accomplish less. Her administrator access to the Magnolia Crest Facebook group was revoked on the morning after the hearing. She had run that group for 9 years. She had posted in it 841 times. The new administrator was Patricia Osei, the board member who had sat with her hands folded and her face very still throughout the entire Thursday night hearing. One of Patricia's first actions as administrator was to remove 47 prior posts that had been flagged by community members for content depicting residents in an unflattering or prejudicial light. Several of them were Brenda's posts about unfamiliar cars and unknown faces. One of them was the post from 3 weeks before the pool incident. Has anyone seen the new couple on Crestwood Court? Don't recognize them. It was gone by Saturday morning. Brenda's personal Facebook account was separately reviewed by the platform following a wave of community reports. Her live video was taken down at her own request, but not before it had been archived and redistributed by 11,000 individual accounts. Her page was demonetized. She deleted the account on day 16. By then, it no longer mattered. Now let me tell you what happened to everyone else. Officer Kevin Pratt entered a 90-day probationary period with mandatory retraining, including a full module on consent-based evidence retrieval and residential status verification. He requested through his supervising officer a private meeting with Walter Caldwell. Walter agreed. The meeting took place 3 weeks after the hearing in a neutral conference room at a downtown Savannah office building. No cameras, no recording, no press. It lasted 19 minutes. No one will ever know exactly what was said. What is known is that Pratt walked out of that room with red eyes. He told Captain Marsh in the parking lot. He didn't raise his voice once. I almost wish he had. Captain Tanya Marsh was formally commended by Chief Coleman for her conduct on the day of the incident. The commendation was entered into her permanent service record. 6 months later, she was promoted to deputy chief. At her promotion ceremony, she thanked 3 people: her mother, her first training officer, and a man she described only as a resident who showed me what it looks like to hold your ground without losing your dignity. The dispatch protocol rewrite was completed in 58 days. The new document required dispatchers to complete 3 specific verification questions before escalating a non-emergency residential complaint to priority response. Internally, several officers began calling it the Caldwell Protocol. Chief Coleman declined that name at Walter's private request. The document was published as the Savannah Residential Integrity Protocol and distributed to every dispatch station in the county. Luis Garza received a formal letter of recognition from the HOA board for his conduct on the day of the incident. The letter was signed by all 5 board members. Walter had quietly suggested the recognition to Harold the week after the hearing, not as a reward, but as a record. Luis kept the letter folded in his wallet for a year. When asked about it, he said only, "I just filmed what was there." Harold Sutton remained HOA president. He did not resign, and Walter did not ask him to. But Harold stood before the full community at the next quarterly meeting and made a statement without notes, without preparation, without the language of institutional distance. He said he had known who Walter and June Caldwell were from the moment he saw their closing documents. He said he had not done enough to welcome them. He said that failure was his to carry. When he finished, Walter, who was sitting in the 3rd row with June beside him, stood up and shook Harold's hand in front of the entire room. Nobody coached that moment. It simply happened. Malcolm Reese introduced a resolution before the Savannah City Council 6 weeks after the incident. The Equitable Enforcement of Residential Covenants Act required all HOA communities within the city limits to include explicit anti-discrimination provisions in their bylaws subject to annual audit. It passed 7-2. Malcolm did not mention Walter Caldwell by name in his remarks. He mentioned instead a principal who had once told him he was one of the 3 smartest young people in a building and had demanded he stop pretending otherwise. 2 months after the pool incident, a small nonprofit organization with no connection to the Caldwell family announced the launch of the Open Door Fund, a legal assistance program for Savannah residents facing housing discrimination and wrongful residential enforcement. The fund supported free legal clinics at 2 historically black institutions in the region. Walter Caldwell donated anonymously in the first week. Within 3 months, 9 of his Magnolia Crest neighbors had made their own donations unprompted, without coordination. Nobody organized that. It simply happened the way things happen when a story lands in the right place. Brenda and Gary Kimball listed their home at the end of the 180-day suspension. They sold it in 3 weeks and moved to a smaller house outside the county. Brenda does not have a Facebook account. Gary, a mutual acquaintance, reported has taken up reading. And Walter Caldwell went back to the pool the following Tuesday. Same time. Same lounger in the shade. Same 2 bottles of sweet tea. June beside him in her sun hat with her novel and her cut fruit. The pool was quiet. The afternoon light came through the magnolia trees in long gold pieces and lay across the water. A neighbor Walter had never met walked over and introduced herself. She brought a plate of shortbread cookies. She said she had lived 4 houses down on Crestwood Court for 3 years, and she was embarrassed it had taken this long to say hello. Walter shook her hand. June offered her a piece of cut fruit. They sat together for 20 minutes and talked about nothing in particular, the heat, the garden, a good restaurant on Drayton Street that June had been meaning to try. When the neighbor left, Walter opened his novel. Chapter 7. He had carried that bookmark for 6 weeks. He read past it. He kept going. He did not stop until the light was gone. The stone entrance sign stood at the front of Magnolia Crest Estates, the way it had always stood, the way it had stood for 37 years. Established in partnership with the Caldwell Community Trust. The name was always there. It had always been there. Some people just needed to be asked to look. Life lesson. Dignity does not announce itself. It does not carry signs or raise its voice or demand to be recognized. It simply holds its ground quietly until the world catches up. Walter Caldwell did not need to crush anyone. He only needed the rules, his community's own rules, to finally apply to everyone equally. That is not a small thing. In the right hands on the right day, that is everything. If this story moved something in you, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from and what you would have done if you had been standing at that pool. Not what you wish you had done, what you would have actually done. Because the people who change things are rarely the powerful ones. They are the ones who were standing nearby and decided that silence was no longer something they were willing to offer. Hit subscribe if you believe every person deserves to read their book in peace. The next story is waiting.